Welcome back to the second video in the Lessons of Basketball series. To quickly sum up, the intent of this series is to touch on the life lessons that can be learned through basketball and sports in general. It's also a way for me to touch on my own experiences revolving around the lesson. The goal is to use myself as an example, and hopefully to inspire someone else to pick up a basketball or even just chase after their own dream. After all, the sport isn't really for everyone. So with that out of the way, let's discuss today's lesson. So today, I wanted to talk about perseverance. Perseverance, hard work, and failure. They're all connected if you ask me, and I'm gonna explain why. I highly value perseverance and hard work. Not everyone has a natural affinity for what they want to do, but everyone can control how hard they work and how far they're willing to go to beat out those with greater natural ability than them. My only ability you could consider natural in the sport was that I was able to shoot pretty much off the bat. But I wasn't athletic, I couldn't do much on the court apart from spot up. I was a burden on defense. Anytime I got the ball and didn't have an open shot, it turned into a turnover. I sucked. I've talked about this before, but I started playing basketball late. I never played organized hoops until I was maybe 10, and even at the time I didn't want to. My mom made me sign up for a sport, and that was just the one I chose. Over time, I grew to like it, but I didn't take the sport seriously until I was around 12. I was completely scoreless in a real game for the first 2 seasons I played, as much as I hate to admit that. Really speaks to my natural shooting ability, huh? But because of this, it made it very hard for me to keep playing. I didn't feel like I was improving, and I never really thought I would. So the summer after 7th grade was when I really started to put my head down and put in hours. Starting to notice real improvement, I decided to try out for a travel team in 8th grade. Looking back, I had no shot. I was small, I wasn't versatile, I was straight up bad. So I got cut, and I just ended up playing in town ball. Despite the league being unbelievably casual, finally breaking the scoring barrier here meant a lot to me. It wasn't just a fluke bucket either. I went from 0 points in a season to a consistent scorer in the span of a year. I didn't score a lot, I didn't get many shots at most of the time, but it was a big step and it gave me confidence. Same story went down the next off season at a greater intensity. Again, I tried out for my high school team freshman year, and despite playing well, I was cut for being, and I quote, too small. I was a 4'11", 14-year-old, and all I wanted to do was play the game, so I was pretty crushed. This is where the failure part comes in for me. Initially, I took this as a failure and it killed my work ethic. For a couple weeks, I just stopped playing. I wanted to quit. Especially since that's what a lot of people around me told me to do. I became pushed out of spite and out of anger. And as much of a powerful motivator as these both can be, I can't say it was a good idea to let myself be controlled by them. But once I reflected, I came to the realization that I haven't failed until I quit. There would always be another opportunity if I worked hard enough and chased after it. Because of that, I got back on the court and got right back to it. Sophomore year rolls around, and despite injuring myself a few weeks before, I misaligned my hip, I tried out again. Due to said injury, I played like shit, I got cut again. That made total sense to me. Following tryouts, I took time off to heal and got to work strengthening my body. I was a player that found myself injured all the time, so I strengthened myself to prevent that, but also to work on my athleticism. Another personal goal of mine was to be able to dunk. I wanted to jump higher, I wanted to run faster, I wanted to be stronger. Over the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I started working with a family friend of mine. He was a hooper in high school, he ran D2 track and field in college, and he does some personal training on the side. For those of you unaware, I also run track and field, so part of working with him was to help me on that front. But over the course of that summer and fall, working with him transformed my body. I started putting on serious muscle. Believe it or not, I used to look way skinnier than I do now. I was more athletic. Everything was starting to go my way. Those 6 a.m. workouts with him were undoubtedly the highlight of my summer. He was such a positive presence, and I just loved to work with him. We're actually starting up again next week, and now that it's starting to warm up, so I'm pretty excited for that, to say the least. But after that, it started to get cold. I just kept working out on my own because I wanted to stick with it, and felt more prepared than ever going into tryouts for junior year. I played great for the most part. Definitely had some rust to shake off since I hadn't played against anyone in forever at that point. But even with that, I was on top of my game. Despite having a massive growth spurt and ending up at about 5'8", still pretty short, but a far cry from where I was in years prior. Despite being in the best shape of my life and in better shape than a lot of the other kids I was up against, despite playing out of my mind a good chunk of the time, I got cut again. This time, the coach pointed to my ability to distribute, which while I acknowledge that's one of the weak points in my game, I was still dishing it out pretty well. Let me go back a few years, maybe 9th grade. My parents must have seen how shitty I felt after tryouts and tried to be there for me because I was just out of it. When I talked to them about the whole experience, they told me there wasn't much else I could have done. Living in a suburban area, they blamed it on politics and moved on. At the time, that idea just pushed me to quit even more. But I felt that I just wasn't as good as I thought I was, which is what made me keep going. My parents pushed me to shift my focus to something else, and I took this the wrong way. It felt like they weren't supporting me, and who would? I mean, when your kid, instead of caring about their grades and seemingly their future, instead they care about a dumb ball and a hoop. I can see where they're coming from. I'm just gonna throw this out there. I don't like the education system. I think it's incredibly flawed. I think it's a totally inaccurate representation of what a person is capable of. And for that reason, I don't put much effort into school. I still get solid grades, mostly B's, but I don't really try. Back to the main point, what I was considering a lack of support pushed me towards spite even further. But after junior year tryouts is when I realized my parents were right and how out of control the whole thing was. When even kids who hadn't even been at tryouts were on the team over me, that's when I realized that there wasn't shit I could do. All these guys had something in common, and that was a connection with the coach. Could be through family, could be because they'd been on a travel team since they were 8. Didn't matter, they had that. I don't resent them for it, I don't resent the coach for it, but they had something I didn't. Actually, that's not true. For a bit of context, my dad and I share different last names. Technically, he's my stepfather, but we refer to each other as a father and son would. My dad golfs with the coach regularly, and he told me to slip that into conversation with the coach, thinking it would help my chances. The coach wouldn't piece it together himself that I was his kid, since my dad and I looked nothing alike, and like I said, our last names are different. But even though I had more than a few opportunities to, I never did. It wouldn't have felt right to bail myself out with some cheap bullshit like that, and it would have been too much to handle if I knew that selling out earlier could have saved me so much mental and emotional stress. Even so, I didn't know if that would even work, so I don't plan to ever stoop that low to earn a spot on a high school basketball team. It's just ridiculous in my eyes. But what's the point of me telling you all this? Well, for one, perseverance is a strong theme throughout this story of mine. I've injured myself more than a few times. I've quote-unquote failed more than a few times, but here I'm still pouring all my energy into a fucking sport. Seems pretty stupid to most people. And again, failure plays a role here too. I don't think I failed. You define failure. I haven't failed because I haven't given up yet. That's just how I work. Finally, hard work is the only reason I haven't quit yet. I know I'm getting better and that I'll continue to if I stick with it. Hard work is my success. If I've failed, but I've poured 110% into something, then in my eyes, I haven't failed. Being able to say that I worked my ass off to be the best I could be at something and mean it is something I'm proud of. So that's always gonna be what I do. You know, that's just what I preach. But thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.